Ancient Egypt holds a prominent and irreplaceable place in world history, not only as one of the earliest and most successful civilizations but also as a source of immense cultural, technological, and intellectual contributions that continue to resonate through modern societies. For thousands of years, Egypt was a beacon of innovation and civilization, its influence stretching far beyond its borders, impacting cultures and civilizations across the Mediterranean and even as far as sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. One of the most remarkable aspects of ancient Egypt is its longevity. The civilization endured for over 3 millennia, surviving through various dynasties and periods of peace and conflict, which has allowed scholars to study the development of a society that was able to maintain remarkable consistency even in the face of external and internal challenges. The contributions of ancient Egypt have left an indelible mark on the world, influencing art, architecture, religion, science, and government in ways that are still relevant today. From the towering pyramids that continue to inspire awe to the advances in writing, medicine, and engineering, Egypt's legacy is enduring. Key themes: geography, politics, society, culture, religion. To understand the impact of ancient Egypt, it is essential to first explore the themes that were the foundation of its civilization. Geography played a pivotal role in shaping the course of Egyptian history. The Nile River, often referred to as the lifeblood of Egypt, provided not only sustenance but also facilitated communication, trade, and military movement. Its annual flooding enriched the soil and supported the agricultural system that was the backbone of Egyptian society. The geographical isolation of Egypt, with its deserts acting as natural barriers, also provided a sense of security, allowing Egyptian culture to flourish with relatively little interference from external forces. Politically, Egypt was renowned for its highly centralized state under the authority of the pharaoh, who was considered both a god and a king. The concept of divine kingship and the pharaoh's role as an intermediary between the gods and the people permeated every aspect of Egyptian governance. This political system was supported by a well-organized bureaucracy, with officials and priests playing crucial roles in the administration, taxation, and maintenance of Egypt's vast resources. The pharaoh's power was reflected in monumental architecture and the vast network of temples, palaces, and tombs that dotted the landscape. Egyptian society was structured with remarkable complexity. At the top stood the pharaoh and the royal family, followed by a class of nobles, priests, and scribes who held significant influence over both religious and political matters. Beneath them were the artisans, farmers, and laborers, whose work sustained the economy and allowed the society to thrive. Despite the rigid social hierarchy, Egyptian society was relatively stable, with many individuals achieving a degree of mobility, especially in times of prosperity. Culturally, ancient Egypt is perhaps best known for its art, architecture, and literature. The Egyptians produced a wealth of sculptures, paintings, and jewelry that reflected their beliefs, values, and understanding of the world. The construction of the pyramids and temples, the grand tombs of pharaohs, and the art of mummification all demonstrate the Egyptians' exceptional skill and their deep commitment to the afterlife. Literature, too, flourished in Egypt, with texts ranging from religious hymns to wisdom literature and even love poetry. Religion played a central role in every facet of Egyptian life. The Egyptians were polytheistic, worshipping a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses who controlled various aspects of the natural and supernatural world. The most important deity was Ra, the sun god, who was considered the creator of all life. Other significant deities included Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and Isis, the goddess of motherhood and magic. Egyptian religious practices, including elaborate burial rituals and the belief in an afterlife, helped to shape much of their culture and daily life. Temples, priesthoods, and religious festivals were integral to Egyptian society, as was the belief that maintaining Ma'at, or divine order, was essential for the prosperity and stability of the kingdom. How Egypt influenced later civilizations. The influence of ancient Egypt extended far beyond its own borders, affecting many of the civilizations that followed. Perhaps the most direct influence came on Greece and Rome, whose rulers often admired and emulated Egypt's monumental architecture, art, and religion. Greek philosophers such as Pythagoras and Plato were exposed to Egyptian ideas, particularly regarding mathematics, geometry, and the concept of the soul. The Greeks were also influenced by Egyptian religious practices, adopting certain deities and rituals into their own pantheon. When the Romans took control of Egypt in 30 BCE, the influence of Egyptian culture continued to be felt, particularly in the realm of religion. The cult of Isis, for example, spread throughout the Roman Empire, and her worshippers formed a powerful network across the Mediterranean. Egyptian symbolism, such as the ankh, the symbol of life, the scarab beetle, and the Eye of Horus, became widely recognized and used throughout the Roman world. In addition to its impact on Mediterranean civilizations, Egypt's legacy also reached into Africa and the Middle East. The Kingdom of Kush, located to the south of Egypt, was heavily influenced by Egyptian culture, adopting many aspects of Egyptian art, architecture, and religion. Over time, the Kushites would even rule Egypt during the 25th dynasty, known as the Kushite dynasty, further cementing the connection between the two civilizations. The legacy of ancient Egypt continues to be felt today in fields such as archaeology, where the discovery of tombs, mummies, and ancient monuments has captivated the modern world. Egypt's achievements in writing, medicine, mathematics, and engineering laid the groundwork for future developments in these fields. In the realm of art, Egyptian motifs continue to inspire modern artists and designers, while the grandeur of Egyptian architecture, as seen in the pyramids and temples, remains a symbol of human achievement. Geography and the birth of Egyptian civilization. The geographical features of ancient Egypt played an essential role in the development of one of the world's oldest and most influential civilizations. The land itself, shaped by the mighty Nile River, presented both challenges and advantages that directly impacted Egyptian society, politics, and culture. Understanding the geographical context of ancient Egypt is crucial to understanding how this civilization emerged, flourished, and sustained itself for thousands of years. The Nile River, its role in shaping Egyptian life. The most prominent geographical feature of Egypt is the Nile River, which flows through the heart of the country from south to north, emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile is one of the longest rivers in the world, and it has been described as the lifeblood of Egyptian civilization. Its significance cannot be overstated. It provided a stable water source in an otherwise arid desert region, nourishing both the land and the people who lived there. The Nile's predictable annual flooding, which occurred every summer, brought nutrient-rich silt to the surrounding soil, creating an environment where agriculture could thrive. This seasonal inundation was the cornerstone of Egypt's agricultural system. As the floodwaters receded, they left behind fertile land, allowing the Egyptians to grow crops such as wheat, barley, flax, and papyrus, among others. This agricultural bounty allowed Egypt to support a large population and form a strong economy, based on surplus crops that could be stored and traded. The river also facilitated transportation and trade, with boats gliding along its waters for centuries, linking various regions of Egypt and providing access to goods from neighboring lands. The Nile acted as Egypt's primary highway, enabling the movement of people, resources, and ideas. This accessibility not only promoted internal cohesion but also encouraged the development of trade routes connecting Egypt with Nubia to the south, the Levant to the northeast, and other regions of the ancient Mediterranean world. Beyond its economic and practical roles, the Nile also had profound cultural and religious significance. The Egyptians viewed the river as a divine gift, associated with several of their gods. Hapi, the god of the Nile and fertility, was especially revered for his role in the annual floods, while the river's northward flow symbolized the journey of the sun, reinforcing the Egyptian understanding of life, death, and the afterlife. The Nile's power, beauty, and consistency formed an integral part of Egypt's identity and contributed to the civilization's stability and longevity. Climate and natural resources. The climate of Egypt is characterized by extreme heat and aridity, with most of the country being covered by desert. However, this harsh climate was tempered by the presence of the Nile, which provided the necessary water to sustain life. The combination of the Nile's fertile soil and the surrounding desert landscape helped to shape the agricultural practices and lifestyle of the Egyptians. While the desert presented challenges, it also acted as a natural barrier, protecting Egypt from invasions and allowing Egyptian culture to develop with relatively little external influence. Natural resources, such as gold, copper, and limestone, also played a vital role in Egypt's development. Gold was especially abundant in the southern parts of Egypt, and it became a symbol of wealth and power. The Egyptians extracted gold from the Nubian desert and used it to create stunning jewelry, statues, and royal tombs. Copper and other metals were essential for producing tools, weapons, and sculptures, while limestone and sandstone were used in the construction of monumental buildings, temples, and tombs, many of which have survived to this day. Papyrus, another vital resource, was found along the banks of the Nile. This plant was harvested and used by the Egyptians to make paper-like material for writing and documentation, enabling the development of one of the earliest writing systems, hieroglyphics. The abundance of natural resources in Egypt, coupled with the availability of fertile land, allowed the Egyptians to build an economically self-sufficient society capable of supporting a complex political structure and monumental achievements. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. The geographical features of Egypt played a crucial role in the eventual unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Egypt was originally divided into two distinct regions: Upper Egypt, the southern part of the country, which extended from the Nile's first cataract near Aswan, and Lower Egypt, the northern part, characterized by the Nile Delta and the fertile land near the Mediterranean Sea. These two regions had different climates, landscapes, and cultures, with Upper Egypt being more mountainous and arid, while Lower Egypt benefited from the rich delta soil. Despite these differences, the two regions were bound by the Nile, which connected them both geographically and culturally. Early Egyptian society likely consisted of a collection of small, independent kingdoms, each controlling parts of Upper or Lower Egypt. Over time, however, the need for unity became apparent, particularly as the regions began to engage in trade and cooperation. The unification of Egypt is traditionally attributed to the legendary King Narmer, also known as Menes, who is said to have conquered Lower Egypt and brought the two regions together under a single rule around 3100 BC. This unification marked the beginning of Egypt's dynastic period and established the foundation for its civilization. It was not merely a political or military achievement, but also a cultural one, as the merging of Upper and Lower Egypt allowed for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and religious practices. The unification of Egypt was symbolized by the double crown worn by the pharaoh, representing both Upper and Lower Egypt. This event laid the groundwork for the creation of a centralized government, with the pharaoh at its head, which would continue to define Egyptian society for centuries. Early settlements and agricultural innovations. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt was in part a result of the agricultural innovations that had begun in the pre-dynastic period, before Egypt's formal unification. These early settlers along the Nile developed systems of irrigation that enabled them to harness the annual flooding of the Nile to cultivate crops on a large scale. The construction of simple irrigation systems using canals, basins, and dikes allowed water to be directed to fields, increasing the productivity of the land. The development of agriculture in Egypt was not only a matter of survival, but also a key factor in the growth of early settlements. By around 5000 BCE, permanent agricultural communities began to form along the Nile. These villages and settlements grew larger and more complex over time, developing into early centers of trade and industry. The surplus of food produced through irrigation and agricultural innovation allowed for the rise of specialization in other sectors, such as pottery, weaving, metalworking, and construction. The Egyptians also began to domesticate animals, including cattle, sheep, and goats, which provided not only food but also labor for agricultural work. The domestication of animals, along with advances in plowing and irrigation, allowed for more efficient farming practices, contributing to the growth of Egypt's population and the stability of its society. The innovations in agriculture had a direct impact on Egypt's economy, with surplus grain being stored for times of drought or famine and traded for other goods. These agricultural advancements laid the foundation for Egypt's prosperity, enabling it to support a growing population, develop trade networks, and produce monumental works of architecture and art. The organization of labor and resources around agriculture also facilitated the development of the state, as the need for centralized management of water, land, and production led to the establishment of a complex bureaucracy. The Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, often referred to as the Age of the Pyramids, marks one of the most iconic and influential periods in Egyptian history. Spanning from roughly 2686 BCE to 2181 BCE, this era was characterized by the development of Egypt's centralized state, the construction of monumental architecture, and the solidification of the role of the pharaoh as both a political ruler and a divine figure. During the Old Kingdom, Egypt reached unprecedented levels of wealth and prosperity, laying the groundwork for the civilization's continued success and cultural achievements for centuries to come. The rise of pharaohs and divine kingship. The concept of the pharaoh as both a king and a god was fully realized during the Old Kingdom. Prior to this period, Egypt had been ruled by regional leaders and local kings who exercised authority in their respective areas, but it was during the early Old Kingdom that the role of the pharaoh became centralized, and the title itself began to represent the unity of the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, under one ruler. The first of these pharaohs was Djoser, who ascended to the throne around 2670 BCE and is best known for commissioning the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. His reign marked a pivotal moment in Egyptian history, as it was during his rule that the concept of divine kingship took root. The pharaoh was not only the earthly ruler of Egypt but was also considered the living god on earth, the intermediary between the gods and the people. This divine status was central to the Egyptian worldview and was reinforced by the royal cult, which venerated the pharaoh as the god Horus during his lifetime and Osiris after his death. The pharaoh's divine nature was also linked to his ability to maintain Ma'at, the cosmic order and balance that was essential for the welfare of Egypt. The pharaoh's role as the guarantor of Ma'at, ensuring peace, stability, and prosperity, elevated him above ordinary mortals. As Egypt's supreme ruler, the pharaoh was entrusted with both earthly and spiritual responsibilities, which included overseeing religious ceremonies, making offerings to the gods, and ensuring the continuity of the state through military victories, tax collection, and judicial oversight. The rise of the pharaoh as a god-king was a critical factor in the stability and unity of Egypt during the Old Kingdom. With divine legitimacy, the pharaoh was able to centralize power and consolidate control over Egypt's resources, workforce, and territories. This allowed for the efficient administration of the kingdom and the ambitious construction projects that would come to define this period. Pyramid construction, Giza, Saqqara, and the role of laborers. The Old Kingdom is perhaps most famous for its colossal pyramid construction projects, which were among the most impressive architectural feats in human history. The pyramids were not just royal tombs, they were monuments to the divine power of the pharaoh and symbols of Egypt's might and wealth. The building of these monumental structures was an undertaking that required vast resources, skilled labor, and a well-organized workforce, marking the Old Kingdom as a period of immense architectural and engineering achievement. The most famous pyramids were those built at Giza, just outside of modern-day Cairo. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for Pharaoh Khufu, Cheops, around 2580 BC, stands as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world and remains the largest pyramid ever constructed. It was originally 481 feet, 146 meters, tall, although today it stands slightly shorter due to the loss of its outer casing stones. The Great Pyramid was constructed using an estimated 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing several tons. The sheer scale and precision of its construction continued to fascinate scholars and visitors alike. Khufu's pyramid was not the only one built at Giza. His son, Pharaoh Khafre, also constructed a pyramid complex, which includes the famous Sphinx, a massive statue with the body of a lion and the head of the pharaoh, symbolizing his power and divine authority. The third pyramid at Giza was built for Pharaoh Menkaure, though it is smaller than the pyramids of Khufu and Khafre. While the pyramids at Giza are the most well-known, the earliest pyramids were constructed at Saqqara, the burial site for the capital city of Memphis. The Step Pyramid, built for Pharaoh Djoser, is considered the first true pyramid and represents a significant advancement in Egyptian architecture. Designed by the architect Imhotep, The step pyramid was originally a series of mastabas, flat-roofed tombs, stacked on top of each other, forming a stepped structure that rose to a height of 204 feet, 62 meters. Building these monumental structures required an enormous workforce, which included skilled laborers, craftsmen, and laborers who worked in seasonal shifts. While many workers may have been conscripted laborers or peasants working as part of a state-run project, others were skilled craftsmen and builders who lived in nearby workers' villages. These villages, such as the one discovered near the Great Pyramid of Giza, show evidence of a well-organized and relatively prosperous workforce. These workers were not slaves, as was once believed, but were rather temporary laborers who were paid for their work and provided with food and shelter. The construction of the pyramids was a highly organized endeavor, involving careful planning, coordination, and management. The precision of the pyramids' construction, particularly their alignment with the stars and the cardinal directions, reflects the advanced knowledge of mathematics, engineering, and astronomy possessed by the ancient Egyptians. The pyramid construction projects also had broader social, political, and religious significance, reinforcing the power of the pharaoh and the belief in an eternal afterlife. Administration, bureaucracy, and the role of viziers. The centralized authority of the pharaoh during the Old Kingdom was supported by a well-organized bureaucracy. The pharaoh, as the supreme ruler, relied on a network of officials to oversee the day-to-day affairs of the state. These officials were responsible for administering the various regions of Egypt, collecting taxes, managing resources, and ensuring that the orders of the pharaoh were carried out efficiently. At the head of this administrative structure was the vizier, the most powerful official in the kingdom after the pharaoh. The vizier served as the pharaoh's chief advisor and was entrusted with overseeing the entire bureaucracy. The vizier was responsible for managing the kingdom's legal system, overseeing public works, supervising the treasury, and ensuring the smooth functioning of the government. In many ways, the vizier acted as the pharaoh's right-hand person, executing royal decrees and maintaining order across Egypt. Beneath the vizier were other important officials, including regional governors, nomarchs, who were responsible for managing Egypt's provinces or nomes. The nomarchs played a key role in local governance, overseeing agricultural production, law enforcement, and the collection of taxes. The ability of the viziers and nomarchs to maintain order and manage Egypt's resources was critical to the success of the Old Kingdom, as it allowed the pharaoh to maintain control over a vast and diverse empire. The Egyptian bureaucracy also included scribes, who were responsible for keeping records, writing legal documents, and maintaining the state's archives. Writing was an essential part of the administration, and scribes held a respected position in Egyptian society. Hieroglyphic writing, the formal script used for monumental inscriptions, was a tool for not only recording history and religious texts but also for managing the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom. Religion and the role of temples. Religion played a central role in the Old Kingdom, both in terms of state governance and daily life. The pharaoh, as the living god, was considered the mediator between the gods and the people. In addition to overseeing the country's affairs, the pharaoh was also responsible for maintaining the favor of the gods through religious rituals and temple offerings. The construction and maintenance of temples were essential to Egyptian religious life, as these were the places where priests and worshippers could offer sacrifices and pray for the continued prosperity of the kingdom. During the Old Kingdom, the major religious centers in Egypt were located at Memphis, Heliopolis, and Thebes, where temples dedicated to various gods were built. The most important deity in this period was Ra, the sun god, who was believed to rule the heavens and the earth. The sun god was worshipped in many forms, including as Atum, Horus, and Osiris, and the belief in his power to ensure the continued flow of the Nile and the prosperity of the land was central to Egyptian religion. Temples were grand structures, often built of limestone or sandstone, and decorated with elaborate carvings depicting the gods and scenes from the afterlife. These temples were staffed by large groups of priests who performed daily rituals, maintained the temple's wealth, and communicated with the gods on behalf of the pharaoh and the people. The role of temples in Egyptian society was not only religious but also economic, as they controlled large amounts of land and resources and employed hundreds of people. In addition to the state-sponsored temples, private individuals could also build small chapels or shrines to honor their ancestors and gods. The religious devotion of the people, along with the role of the pharaoh and the temples in maintaining Ma'at, was integral to the success and stability of the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom of Egypt represents the dawn of one of the world's most enduring and influential civilizations. Through the establishment of divine kingship, the construction of the pyramids, the development of an organized bureaucracy, and the central role of religion in society, Egypt laid the foundation for centuries of cultural and political achievement. The era of the Old Kingdom remains an iconic symbol of ancient Egypt's power, ingenuity, and spiritual depth, and its legacy continues to shape our understanding of the ancient world today. The First Intermediate Period and the Middle Kingdom, circa 2181 to 1786 BCE. The period between the Old Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom in ancient Egypt was one of significant upheaval, political fragmentation, and eventual reunification. Known as the First Intermediate Period, circa 2181 to 2055 BCE, it was characterized by a breakdown in centralized authority, leading to the disintegration of Egypt into rival regional powers. Despite the challenges, the eventual reunification of Egypt under Mentuhotep II heralded the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1786 BCE, a time of revitalization, cultural flourishing, and territorial expansion. This period saw Egypt regain its former glory, building the foundation for a new era of political stability and cultural achievement. Political fragmentation and instability. The Old Kingdom's downfall was marked by the gradual weakening of the central government, possibly due to a combination of internal struggles, economic issues, and environmental factors, such as lower than usual flooding of the Nile. The collapse of the Old Kingdom around 2181 BCE ushered in a period of political instability and fragmentation known as the First Intermediate Period. During this time, Egypt was no longer ruled by a single, powerful pharaoh, but instead was divided into numerous competing kingdoms, each controlled by local rulers known as nomarchs. These regional rulers governed the nomes, provinces, of Egypt, each with varying degrees of power and influence. The political fragmentation led to significant social and economic instability. With no strong central authority, the nomarchs exerted their independence, and internal strife became widespread. Local rulers often engaged in military conflicts to expand their territories, while the once mighty bureaucracy disintegrated. The central administration, which had been so effective during the Old Kingdom, broke down, and the country became embroiled in a series of power struggles. This period was a time of great uncertainty and decline, with limited records surviving to provide a comprehensive account of the events. In addition to the internal strife, Egypt also faced external threats, including incursions from neighboring peoples and nomadic tribes. The disunity of the period meant that Egypt was ill-equipped to deal with these external challenges, further exacerbating the instability. The reunification under Mentuhotep II. The First Intermediate Period eventually came to an end with the rise of Mentuhotep II, a ruler from the Theban region in Upper Egypt. Mentuhotep II is traditionally credited with reunifying Egypt around 2055 BCE, marking the beginning of the Middle Kingdom. His reunification of Egypt was a momentous achievement that restored central authority and stabilized the kingdom after a century of fragmentation. Mentuhotep II's ascent to power came after a series of conflicts between rival factions, most notably the division between the north and the south. While northern Egypt, Lower Egypt, was often under the control of local rulers in Heracleopolis, southern Egypt, Upper Egypt, was dominated by Thebes. Through a series of successful military campaigns and strategic alliances, Mentuhotep II was able to subdue the northern rulers and assert control over all of Egypt. His reign, which lasted for 51 years, was marked by strong leadership, the re-establishment of centralized power, and a renewed sense of unity across the land. Mentuhotep II's reunification of Egypt was symbolized by the resumption of the construction of monumental royal tombs, including his own in the Valley of the Kings. He also initiated a series of reforms to restore stability, reorganize the bureaucracy, and reaffirm Egypt's religious practices. Under his rule, Egypt was able to recover from the chaos of the First Intermediate Period and embark on a period of renewed prosperity. Mentuhotep II's legacy as a unifier of Egypt was crucial in the transition from the chaos of the First Intermediate Period to the relative stability and cultural flourishing that would characterize the Middle Kingdom. His ability to restore order and inspire confidence in the central government paved the way for the strong rule of later Middle Kingdom pharaohs, such as Amenemhat I. Cultural and artistic developments. The Middle Kingdom, which followed the reunification under Mentuhotep II, is often considered a golden age in Egyptian culture, art, and literature. With the country once again united under a strong, central government, Egypt experienced a period of relative peace and stability that allowed for the flourishing of arts, literature, and architectural achievements. One of the most notable aspects of Middle Kingdom culture was the development of Egyptian literature. This period saw the rise of a new literary tradition, including wisdom literature, hymns, and narrative texts. The instruction of Amenemhat, attributed to Amenemhat I, is one of the most famous examples, offering moral and political advice to the future king. These writings reflected the values of the time, emphasizing themes of loyalty, justice, and piety, and they were meant to guide both rulers and citizens in their duties to maintain ma'at, order, and justice in society. The Middle Kingdom also saw the development of the tale of Sinuh, a famous Egyptian literary work that tells the story of a court official who flees Egypt but eventually returns after a series of adventures. The tale of Sinuh is notable for its complex narrative and emotional depth, offering insight into Egyptian values, political life, and the human experience. In terms of art and sculpture, the Middle Kingdom marked a return to the idealized forms of the Old Kingdom, but with a more realistic and humanized approach to depicting rulers and officials. The art of the time was characterized by a greater focus on individual expression and less rigid adherence to traditional royal iconography. Statues from this period, such as the famous busts of pharaohs like Amenemhat II and Senusret II, depict the rulers with a more naturalistic style, capturing their personalities and presenting them as more accessible figures to the people. Architecture also saw significant advancements during the Middle Kingdom. The construction of royal tombs shifted from the grand pyramids of the Old Kingdom to rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings and the construction of temples and fortresses. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom began to build large, elaborate mortuary temples and expanded existing religious sites. The Temple of Ammonius at Karnak, for instance, saw significant developments during this time. Expansion into Nubia and trade routes. The Middle Kingdom was not only a time of internal consolidation and cultural flourishing, but also a period of military expansion and increased engagement with neighboring regions. One of the key regions to the south of Egypt was Nubia, an area rich in natural resources, particularly gold. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom sought to extend Egyptian influence into Nubia, partly for economic reasons and partly to secure Egypt's southern border. During the reign of Amenemhat I, Egypt launched a series of military campaigns into Nubia, aiming to control the trade routes and gain access to the region's wealth. These expeditions resulted in the establishment of Egyptian fortresses along the Nile in Nubia, which helped secure the flow of trade and prevent incursions from local kingdoms. The conquest of Nubia allowed Egypt to extend its control over vital trade routes that connected Egypt to sub-Saharan Africa, bringing in valuable commodities such as gold, ivory, and ebony. In addition to military expansion, the Middle Kingdom also saw the establishment of strong trade networks with neighboring regions, such as the Levant and the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt engaged in trade with regions to the northeast, exchanging goods such as grain, linen, and papyrus for timber, copper, and precious stones. The increase in trade fostered economic growth and prosperity, further strengthening Egypt's position as a dominant power in the ancient world. The Middle Kingdom's expansionist policies, particularly in Nubia, laid the groundwork for Egypt's later military campaigns in the New Kingdom, where Egypt would become a major imperial power. However, the Middle Kingdom's emphasis on diplomacy, trade, and maintaining strong border defenses also helped to ensure the kingdom's long-term stability and prosperity. The First Intermediate Period and the Middle Kingdom represent a time of both crisis and rejuvenation in ancient Egyptian history. The first intermediate period was a time of political fragmentation, internal strife, and instability. However, the reunification of Egypt under Mentuhotep II marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, a period of cultural and political revival. The Middle Kingdom saw significant advancements in art, literature, and architecture, as well as military expansion into Nubia and the development of trade routes. The achievements of the Middle Kingdom laid the foundation for the later periods of Egypt's history and ensured its place as one of the most enduring and influential civilizations in the ancient world. The Second Intermediate Period and the Hyksos invasion. The transition from the Middle Kingdom to the New Kingdom was marked by another period of instability and decline, known as the Second Intermediate Period, circa 1786 to 1550 BCE. This era saw Egypt once again fractured and vulnerable, but it also set the stage for the eventual rise of the New Kingdom, when Egypt would become an imperial power. One of the most significant events of the Second Intermediate Period was the invasion and subsequent rule of the Hyksos, a foreign group that would leave a lasting impact on Egypt's military, technology, and political landscape. Their presence in Egypt led to profound changes that shaped the future of the civilization. Decline of the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom, despite its initial successes, eventually began to unravel in the latter half of the 12th dynasty. The decline can be attributed to several factors, including internal corruption, weakening central authority, economic difficulties, and military defeats. As the pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom grew more focused on securing Egypt's borders and managing its vast territories, they faced challenges in maintaining internal order and economic stability. A significant factor in the decline of the Middle Kingdom was the weakening of the central government. The viziers, local governors, and nomarchs gained increasing power, which led to a rise in regionalism and a decline in the pharaoh's authority. The loss of effective central control over Egypt's provinces contributed to the eventual disintegration of the strong, centralized system that had characterized the earlier Middle Kingdom. Additionally, the Middle Kingdom's military campaigns, particularly in Nubia and the Levant, began to strain Egypt's resources. Though Egypt expanded its borders and secured trade routes, the growing need for military campaigns and the challenges of controlling distant territories wore down the strength of the kingdom. The pharaohs of the 13th dynasty, which succeeded the powerful 12th dynasty, were less capable of managing Egypt's vast empire. As Egypt became more vulnerable, internal dissent grew, and external threats emerged, particularly from the east. One such threat was the gradual incursion of foreign peoples, particularly the Hyksos. This group would play a crucial role in the events that marked the end of the Middle Kingdom and the beginning of the Second Intermediate Period. Who were the Hyksos? Their impact on Egypt. The Hyksos were a Semitic-speaking people from the Near East, likely originating from the Levant or regions farther east. The term Hyksos is derived from an Egyptian phrase that means foreign rulers or rulers of foreign lands. They first appeared in Egypt during the 13th dynasty but did not take full control until the early 14th dynasty, when they established their rule in the eastern Nile Delta. The exact origins of the Hyksos are still debated, but it is widely believed that they were a mix of various groups from the Levant, including Semitic peoples, who came to Egypt as traders or migrants. Over time, they infiltrated the northeastern regions of Egypt, particularly the Delta region, where they established themselves as a powerful military force. Their ability to conquer Egypt was facilitated by their advanced military technology, which was superior to that of the Egyptians at the time. The Hyksos rule began when they captured the important city of Avaris, modern Tel el-Dabeh, which became their capital. Avaris' location in the northeastern delta gave the Hyksos strategic control over Egypt's trade routes and access to the eastern Mediterranean. The Hyksos established a dynasty known as the 15th dynasty, and their control spread across the delta, challenging the authority of the Egyptian pharaohs of the Theban region in the south. The Hyksos invasion was a significant event in Egyptian history, as it marked the first time that Egypt had been ruled by foreign rulers. The Hyksos brought with them several technological and military innovations that would have a lasting impact on Egypt. Among the most important of these were the use of the chariot, the composite bow, and advanced metalworking techniques. Technological and military changes. The Hyksos were able to establish and maintain their control over Egypt, in part because of their superior military technology. One of the most significant technological advancements the Hyksos brought to Egypt was the chariot. The chariot was a powerful military tool that greatly enhanced the mobility and firepower of their armies. Used primarily for warfare, the chariot was a fast, lightweight vehicle that could carry archers or spearmen into battle. This technology was something the Egyptians had not seen before, and it gave the Hyksos a distinct advantage on the battlefield. The Hyksos also introduced the composite bow, a much more powerful weapon than the traditional Egyptian bow. The composite bow was made of layers of wood, horn, and sinew, making it both stronger and more compact. This allowed Hyksos archers to fire arrows with greater force and range, which gave them a military edge. The Egyptians would eventually adopt the composite bow, but during the initial phases of the Hyksos invasion, this technological advantage was crucial in their conquest of Egypt. In addition to the chariot and composite bow, the Hyksos brought advanced metalworking techniques, particularly in the creation of weapons and armor. The use of bronze and iron, combined with their expertise in crafting weapons, allowed the Hyksos to equip their armies with superior weaponry. The Egyptians, at the time, were still relying on simpler bronze tools and weapons, and the Hyksos' advanced metallurgy made them a formidable force. The Hyksos also introduced new forms of fortification and military organization. Their fortified city of Avaris became a center of power, and they built strong defensive walls to protect their territory. These walls, along with their military organization, helped them maintain control over Egypt for several generations. However, despite their military innovations and initial successes, the Hyksos were not able to completely conquer all of Egypt. The Theban rulers of Upper Egypt, led by pharaohs like Seqenenretau, Kamose, and Ahmose-I, waged a long and difficult struggle to expel the Hyksos from the country. The expulsion of the Hyksos and the beginning of the New Kingdom. The Hyksos' rule over Egypt lasted for about a century, but their reign was eventually overthrown by a series of military campaigns led by the Theban pharaohs. The struggle to expel the Hyksos was a critical moment in Egyptian history, as it marked the end of foreign rule and set the stage for the rise of the New Kingdom, one of Egypt's most powerful and prosperous periods. The final victory over the Hyksos came under the leadership of Ahmose-I, the pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. Ahmose's campaigns to expel the Hyksos began around 1570 BCE and were ultimately successful. Using the military technologies introduced by the Hyksos, such as the chariot and the composite bow, Ahmose was able to defeat the foreign rulers and recapture the city of Avaris. Ahmose's victory over the Hyksos was a turning point in Egyptian history. It not only marked the end of the Second Intermediate Period but also paved the way for the establishment of the New Kingdom, a period of imperial expansion, wealth, and cultural achievement. The Theban pharaohs who followed Ahmose, including Thutmose I, Thutmose III, and Ramses II, would go on to expand Egypt's territory to its greatest extent and achieve some of the civilization's most remarkable military, architectural, and cultural successes. In addition to the expulsion of the Hyksos, the campaigns led by Ahmose and his successors also marked the beginning of a more militarized and aggressive Egypt. The military innovations introduced by the Hyksos were adopted and refined by the Egyptians, who would go on to become one of the most formidable military powers in the ancient world. The Second Intermediate Period and the Hyksos invasion were defining moments in Egyptian history. While the invasion and occupation of Egypt by the Hyksos were periods of foreign domination and instability, they also brought about significant technological and military changes that would later benefit Egypt. The introduction of the chariot, composite bow, and advanced metallurgy gave Egypt the tools it needed to reclaim its independence and become a dominant military force in the ancient world. The expulsion of the Hyksos, led by the Theban pharaoh Ahmose-I, marked the beginning of the New Kingdom and set Egypt on the path to its greatest imperial era. Despite the challenges posed by the Hyksos, their rule ultimately paved the way for Egypt's resurgence and its role as a powerful civilization in the ancient Mediterranean world. The New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, the Age of Empire. The New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, represents one of the most illustrious periods in the history of ancient Egypt. It is during this time that Egypt transformed from a relatively inward-looking kingdom into a powerful empire, extending its reach into neighboring regions and becoming one of the dominant forces in the ancient world. The military expansion and political consolidation that occurred during this period laid the foundations for Egypt's dominance for centuries. The new kingdom also witnessed the rule of some of Egypt's most famous pharaohs, including Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, and Ramses II, who would shape the course of Egyptian history and leave behind monumental legacies. The expulsion of the Hyksos and Egypt's military expansion. The new kingdom begins with the successful expulsion of the Hyksos from Egypt, an event that marks the transition from the Second Intermediate Period and the restoration of Egyptian sovereignty. After the Hyksos were driven out by Ahmose I, the founder of the 18th dynasty, Egypt began to experience a period of military and territorial expansion that would continue throughout the new kingdom. The victory over the Hyksos was significant not only because it ended foreign rule but also because it allowed the Egyptians to reassert their authority over their neighboring regions, including Nubia to the south and the Levant to the northeast. Ahmose's military campaigns to drive out the Hyksos were followed by a series of successful campaigns in these regions, which laid the groundwork for Egypt's future imperial ambitions. Under the reigns of subsequent pharaohs, Egypt expanded its territory far beyond its traditional borders. Thutmose I, Thutmose III, and Ramses II, among others, led campaigns to secure Egypt's influence over Nubia, the Levant, and parts of modern-day Syria and Iraq. These military expeditions were not just about conquest, but about securing trade routes, acquiring tribute, and ensuring Egypt's dominance in the region. By the height of the New Kingdom, Egypt controlled vast territories stretching from the Nile's first cataract in Nubia to the Euphrates River in Mesopotamia, establishing itself as an imperial power. Egypt's military expansion during the New Kingdom also saw significant changes in warfare. The pharaohs adopted and refined military innovations from the Hyksos, such as the chariot, which became a key element of the Egyptian military. The use of chariots in battle, along with the skillful archers and well-trained infantry, made Egypt's army one of the most formidable in the ancient world. The rule of Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, and Ramses II. Three of the most prominent rulers of the New Kingdom were Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, and Ramses II. Each of these pharaohs played a crucial role in shaping the history of Egypt, and their reigns are remembered for their political, military, and cultural achievements. Hatshepsut, r. 1479 to 1458 BC. Hatshepsut was one of Egypt's few female pharaohs, and her reign is one of the most remarkable in the history of ancient Egypt. She came to power as regent for her young stepson, Thutmose III, but eventually declared herself pharaoh, ruling as a co-regent with him for much of his early life. Hatshepsut is remembered for her ambitious building projects, including the construction of the stunning mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, which stands as a testament to her grandeur and vision. Hatshepsut also pursued an aggressive foreign policy, though she is more famous for her trade expeditions rather than military conquest. The most notable of these was her famous expedition to the land of Punt, modern-day Somalia or Eritrea, which brought back vast quantities of valuable goods, including incense, myrrh, and exotic animals. This trade helped to secure Egypt's economic stability and enrich its culture. Hatshepsut's reign was relatively peaceful, and she oversaw a period of economic prosperity and cultural growth. However, after her death, Thutmose III sought to erase her memory, likely because of his desire to consolidate his own power. Nevertheless, Hatshepsut's reign left a lasting impact on Egypt, and her temple at Deir el-Bahari remains one of the most impressive monuments of the New Kingdom. Thutmose III, r. 1479 to 1425 BC. Thutmose III, often referred to as the Napoleon of Egypt, is considered one of Egypt's greatest military leaders. Though he initially ruled alongside his stepmother, Hatshepsut, Thutmose III took full control of Egypt after her death. He is credited with expanding Egypt's empire to its greatest extent, conducting 17 military campaigns throughout his reign. Thutmose III's campaigns were primarily focused on the Levant and Syria, where he sought to establish Egyptian dominance over the many small city-states. His most famous battle was the Battle of Megiddo, circa 1457 BCE, in which he decisively defeated a coalition of Canaanite cities. This victory secured Egypt's control over the region and ensured that Egypt's influence in the Levant would remain strong for centuries. Thutmose III also introduced a new form of administration to manage his empire. He established a network of governors and vassal rulers who paid tribute to Egypt in exchange for protection and autonomy. This system helped to maintain Egyptian control over distant lands, and Thutmose III's military exploits and diplomatic efforts ensured that Egypt remained a dominant power in the ancient Near East. Ramses II, r. 1279 to 1213 BC. Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, was one of Egypt's longest reigning and most celebrated pharaohs. His reign lasted for 66 years, during which time Egypt reached the height of its power and influence. Ramses is best known for his military campaigns, monumental building projects, and the construction of numerous temples and statues, many of which remain iconic symbols of ancient Egypt. Ramses II's most famous military campaign was his confrontation with the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh, which took place near the Orontes River in modern-day Syria. While the battle itself was inconclusive, Ramses portrayed it as a great victory in his inscriptions, highlighting his leadership and bravery. The battle marked the beginning of a peace treaty with the Hittites, one of the earliest known international peace agreements, which solidified Egypt's influence in the Levant. In addition to his military exploits, Ramses II is renowned for his extensive building projects. Among his most famous constructions are the temples at Abu Simbel, where enormous statues of the pharaoh stand as a testament to his grandeur. Ramses also built many temples, including the Ramesseum at Thebes, and expanded the Temple of Karnak, one of Egypt's most important religious sites. His reign was a golden age of Egyptian art and architecture, and his legacy endures in the monumental structures that he left behind. Religious revolution under Akhenaten and Nefertiti. One of the most controversial and unique periods in Egyptian history occurred during the reign of Akhenaten, r. 1353 to 1336 BCE, whose religious revolution transformed Egypt's spiritual life. Akhenaten, originally known as Amenhotep IV, introduced a radical shift in Egypt's traditional polytheistic beliefs by promoting the worship of the sun disk, Aten, as the one true God. Akhenaten's religious reform is often seen as an attempt to centralize power and reduce the influence of Egypt's powerful priesthood, especially the priests of Ammonius. By elevating Aten above all other gods, Akhenaten sought to create a new monotheistic religion that would place him and his family at the center of the religious and political life of Egypt. This move was highly controversial, and many of the traditional temples and cults were dismantled or abandoned. Akhenaten's queen, Nefertiti, played a significant role in this religious revolution, both as his co-regent and as a symbol of the new religious order. Nefertiti is often depicted as the most powerful woman of her time, and her beauty is immortalized in the famous bust of her that was discovered in Amarna. Nefertiti's role in Akhenaten's reforms suggests that she may have shared his vision for a new religious order, though much about her life remains mysterious. The religious revolution of Akhenaten, while initially successful, ultimately proved unsustainable. After Akhenaten's death, his successors, including his young son Tutankhamun, abandoned his religious reforms and restored the traditional polytheistic worship of the gods, particularly Ammonius. The legacy of Akhenaten's religious revolution, however, remains a subject of fascination for scholars and has been interpreted as an early attempt at monotheism. The construction of the Valley of the Kings. One of the most significant architectural and cultural achievements of the New Kingdom was the construction of the Valley of the Kings, a royal burial site on the west bank of the Nile near Thebes. The Valley of the Kings became the burial place for many of Egypt's most powerful pharaohs, including Thutmose III, Ramses II, and Tutankhamun. The decision to move royal tombs away from the traditional burial sites in pyramids to hidden tombs in the valley was likely influenced by the need to protect the pharaoh's tombs from tomb robbers, a growing problem in the New Kingdom. The tombs in the Valley of the Kings were elaborate underground complexes, carved into the rock and adorned with vibrant paintings, inscriptions, and hieroglyphs that depicted the deceased pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. These tombs were designed to protect the pharaoh's body and ensure a safe passage to the next life. The construction of the tombs required vast resources and a highly skilled workforce, and the burial practices associated with the Valley of the Kings reflect the central importance of religion and the afterlife in New Kingdom Egypt. Among the most famous tombs in the Valley of the Kings is the tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered by Howard Carter in 1922. The tomb's discovery revealed an unprecedented wealth of artifacts, and it remains one of the most significant archaeological finds in history. The New Kingdom was a period of extraordinary military and cultural achievement for Egypt. The expulsion of the Hyksos, the expansion of Egypt's empire under powerful pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramses II, and the religious revolution of Akhenaten all played significant roles in shaping Egypt's legacy. The New Kingdom saw the peak of Egypt's power, wealth, and cultural expression, and its pharaohs left behind monumental constructions, groundbreaking military strategies, and a lasting impact on the ancient world. Society and daily life in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptian society was highly structured, with distinct roles and responsibilities that shaped daily life and defined the functioning of the state. From the divine rule of the pharaoh to the humble life of the farmer, the social structure was intricately tied to religion, economy, and the culture of Egypt. The everyday lives of Egyptians, whether they were nobles, priests, artisans, or farmers, were deeply influenced by the overarching religious and political systems of the time. This section will explore the roles of key figures in Egyptian society, the daily lives of common people, as well as aspects of family, education, and entertainment. The role of the pharaoh, priests, and officials. At the pinnacle of Egyptian society was the pharaoh, considered not just the political leader but also a divine figure. The pharaoh was regarded as the living god on earth, the earthly embodiment of Horus, the god of kingship and the sky. The pharaoh's primary responsibility was to maintain Ma'at, the cosmic order that ensured peace, prosperity, and stability in Egypt. This was a sacred duty that intertwined religious and political leadership, making the pharaoh both the head of state and the high priest of the nation. The pharaoh's power was supported by a vast bureaucracy, which included viziers, priests, and a network of officials who helped manage the administration and religious activities. Viziers were the pharaoh's chief officials, acting as the overseers of government and law. They were responsible for the implementation of royal decrees and were crucial in the administration of justice. Viziers often held immense power, as they were the ones who could influence the direction of policy and decision-making. Priests played a vital role in Egyptian society, particularly because religion was central to the culture. They managed the temples where the gods were worshipped and oversaw the offerings, rituals, and festivals that maintained the favor of the gods. The priesthood was a powerful institution, often wealthy and influential. Priests were considered intermediaries between the gods and the people, and their role in maintaining the spiritual and cosmic order was seen as essential for the prosperity of Egypt. Temples were not only religious centers but also economic hubs, where vast wealth was accumulated and redistributed. High-ranking officials, such as scribes, were essential to the functioning of the state. Scribes were highly educated individuals who were responsible for recording laws, royal decrees, tax collections, and other vital records. Because they were literate in the complex system of hieroglyphics, scribes enjoyed high social status and were often employed in the royal court or administrative offices. They were indispensable in maintaining the bureaucracy of ancient Egypt and were well compensated for their work. Life of common people, farmers, artisans, and merchants. While the pharaoh and the elite class enjoyed lavish lifestyles, the vast majority of Egyptians were common people who lived simpler lives. The backbone of Egyptian society was the farmer. Egypt's agricultural economy was built around the Nile River, which provided fertile soil for farming through its annual inundation. Farmers worked the land, growing crops such as wheat, barley, and flax, which were essential for both sustenance and trade. Farmers were subject to the rhythm of the seasons, with much of their work being dictated by the flood cycle of the Nile. During the inundation, the annual flooding, Farmers often worked on construction projects or in the service of the state. During the planting and harvest seasons, their work focused on cultivating and collecting crops. Though they owned the land they worked, farmers had to pay a significant portion of their produce as taxes to the state or temple authorities. Artisans were another important group within Egyptian society. They were skilled workers who created everything from everyday tools and pottery to elaborate jewelry, sculptures, and paintings for the temples and tombs of the elite. Artisans typically worked in workshops, either independently or as part of large state-run enterprises. Although they did not have the wealth or power of the ruling elite, artisans enjoyed a certain level of respect for their skills. Many artisans are remembered for the stunning works they created for the tombs of pharaohs and nobles, which continue to captivate modern audiences with their beauty and craftsmanship. Merchants were involved in trade both within Egypt and with foreign lands. Egypt's extensive network of trade routes connected it to regions as far away as Nubia, the Levant, and even parts of Mesopotamia. Merchants played a key role in importing and exporting goods such as luxury items, incense, timber, and precious stones. Though not as wealthy as the nobility, successful merchants could accumulate significant wealth and enjoy a comfortable lifestyle. They often lived in towns and villages, working in bustling marketplaces where goods were traded and bartered. The lives of common people, while not as glamorous as those of the pharaoh and the elite, were no less significant in the functioning of the Egyptian state. Their work supported the economy, and their contributions to religious life helped to maintain the balance of Ma'at, which was believed to guarantee Egypt's prosperity. Marriage, family, and education. Marriage in ancient Egypt was an important social institution that helped to solidify the social order. Most marriages were monogamous, and family was the cornerstone of Egyptian society. The family unit was seen as the basic building block of society, with the husband and wife working together to maintain the household. In many ways, the roles of men and women were complementary. While men were generally responsible for the outside work, such as farming and managing finances, women took care of the household duties, including cooking, weaving, and raising children. However, Egyptian women enjoyed a level of freedom and respect that was relatively uncommon in the ancient world. They could own property, initiate divorce, and even hold positions of power, such as priestesses or even as rulers, as seen in the case of Hatshepsut. Although men were typically the head of the household, women were often revered for their roles as mothers, and fertility was highly valued. The goddess Isis, who was associated with motherhood and family, was one of the most widely worshipped deities in Egypt. Children were valued and seen as blessings from the gods. They were often depicted in tombs and paintings as joyous and playful, a reflection of the happiness associated with family life. Education was highly valued, particularly for boys, who were trained to become scribes, priests, or soldiers. Though formal schooling was not available for all, it was important for a child to learn from their parents or tutors. Girls, while not typically trained for official roles, were educated in household management and domestic tasks. Education in ancient Egypt was closely tied to religion and the state. Scribes, for example, had to learn the intricate system of hieroglyphs, which required years of study. These students often attended scribal schools, where they were taught to read, write, and understand the laws, religious texts, and poetry that formed the core of Egyptian knowledge. Entertainment, games, and pastimes. Despite the demanding work lives of the common people, leisure and entertainment were important aspects of Egyptian culture. The ancient Egyptians enjoyed various forms of entertainment, both physical and intellectual. One of the most popular pastimes was music. The Egyptians had a wide range of musical instruments, including harps, lyres, drums, and flutes. Music played a central role in religious rituals, festivals, and feasts, and both the wealthy and commoners participated in musical events. Games were another important source of entertainment, especially for children and young adults. One of the most popular games in ancient Egypt was Senet, a board game that is often depicted in tomb paintings and has been called the game of passing. The game is believed to have had spiritual significance, with players attempting to pass through obstacles and reach the afterlife. It was played on a board with 30 squares, and its rules have been reconstructed through various archaeological finds. Other pastimes included hunting, fishing, and dancing, especially during festivals and celebrations. The Egyptians were skilled hunters, and hunting trips, often involving large groups of people, were a popular way to spend leisure time. Similarly, fishing was a common activity along the Nile, and many Egyptians enjoyed the process of catching fish for both food and recreation. Public festivals and religious celebrations were major events in Egyptian life. These festivals were times of feasting, music, dancing, and religious rituals, and they brought people from all walks of life together. One of the most famous festivals was the Opet festival, which celebrated the divine union of the god Ammonius with his consort Mut and son Khonsu. During these events, the god's statues were paraded through the streets in grand processions. Life in ancient Egypt, though shaped by a rigid social structure, was also filled with diverse activities that reflected the cultural and religious richness of the civilization. The pharaoh, priests, and officials played crucial roles in maintaining the state and religious life, while farmers, artisans, and merchants formed the backbone of the economy. Family life was central to Egyptian society, and both men and women played important roles in their households. Entertainment and leisure activities, including music, games, and festivals, allowed Egyptians to celebrate their religion, maintain social bonds, and enjoy moments of relaxation. This blend of labor, spirituality, and celebration created a society that was both dynamic and harmonious, focused on the maintenance of Ma'at and the prosperity of the state. Religion, mythology, and the afterlife in ancient Egypt. Religion was a central aspect of daily life in ancient Egypt, and its influence permeated all aspects of society, from the role of the pharaoh to the lives of common people. Ancient Egyptians believed in a multitude of gods and goddesses, each of whom played a role in maintaining the cosmic balance of the universe. Their religious practices, rituals, and beliefs about the afterlife were deeply interwoven with the political, social, and cultural fabric of their civilization. The mythological stories and the concepts they embraced shaped their worldview and provided explanations for natural phenomena, as well as guidance on how to live righteous lives. Major gods and goddesses: Ra, Osiris, Isis, Anubis. The pantheon of ancient Egypt was vast and complex, with gods and goddesses representing various aspects of nature, life, and the cosmos. Among the most significant deities were Ra, Osiris, Isis, and Anubis, each of whom played an essential role in the religion and mythology of Egypt. Ra, the sun god, was the most important deity in Egyptian mythology. Ra was seen as the creator of all life and the ruler of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. He was often depicted with the head of a falcon, crowned with a solar disk. Ra was believed to sail through the sky in a boat during the day, bringing light to the world, and to travel through the underworld at night, battling the forces of chaos. The sun itself was seen as a symbol of Ra's power, and the rising and setting of the sun were closely tied to the cycles of life and death. Osiris was one of the most beloved gods, representing death, resurrection, and the afterlife. He was considered the king of the underworld, and his story was central to Egyptian religious beliefs. According to mythology, Osiris was a god of life who was killed by his brother Set, the god of chaos and destruction. Osiris' wife, Isis, a powerful goddess of magic and motherhood, resurrected him with her magical powers. Osiris' death and resurrection symbolized the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a theme that was crucial to Egyptian spirituality. Osiris was often depicted as a mummified king, and his image was associated with fertility and the cycles of nature. Isis was one of the most prominent goddesses in Egyptian religion. She was the sister and wife of Osiris, and her role in his resurrection made her a central figure in Egyptian mythology. Isis was regarded as a goddess of magic, healing, and protection. She was also closely associated with motherhood and was often depicted as a nurturing figure. Devotees of Isis believed that she had the power to protect the dead and guide them to the afterlife. She was frequently worshipped by ordinary people who sought her protection and blessings. Anubis, the god of mummification and the afterlife, was another key figure in Egyptian mythology. Anubis was depicted as a jackal or as a man with the head of a jackal, and he was believed to oversee the embalming process, ensuring that the deceased were properly prepared for the journey to the afterlife. As the god who guided souls into the underworld, Anubis played a crucial role in the judgment of the dead. He was associated with the weighing of the heart ceremony, where the hearts of the deceased were weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order. Together, these gods and goddesses, along with many others, formed a complex network of deities who were believed to govern the natural world, maintain cosmic balance, and ensure the well-being of the living and the dead. Religious rituals and temple worship. Religious rituals and temple worship were central to the daily life of ancient Egyptians. Temples were the heart of religious practice, and they were dedicated to specific gods and goddesses. They were grand structures, often adorned with statues, inscriptions, and sacred symbols, designed to honor the gods and maintain the harmony of the universe. Temples also served as the centers of economic and social life, housing vast resources, scribes, priests, and other officials. The primary role of temples was to serve as the residence of the gods on earth. Priests performed daily rituals, including offerings of food, incense, and precious items to appease the gods and maintain their favor. These rituals were seen as essential for the well-being of both the nation and the individual. The belief was that the gods needed sustenance and care in order to maintain cosmic order, and if the gods were pleased, Egypt would prosper. The temple priesthood was a powerful institution, with priests performing key roles as intermediaries between the gods and the people. High priests were responsible for overseeing the rituals, managing the temple's wealth, and interpreting the will of the gods. Lesser priests carried out the daily duties of the temple, which included tending to the gods' statues, making offerings, and maintaining the sacred space. Priesthood was considered one of the highest callings in Egypt, and priests held significant influence within society. Public festivals were important occasions in the Egyptian religious calendar. These events often involved elaborate processions, sacrifices, music, and dance, all designed to honor the gods and ensure their protection over the land. The Opet festival, for example, celebrated the divine union of the god Ammonius, his consort Mut, and their son Khonsu, and was an occasion for socializing, feasting, and religious observance. The concept of Ma'at and the afterlife. One of the central concepts in Egyptian religion was Ma'at, which referred to the divine order of the universe, encompassing truth, justice, balance, and harmony. Ma'at was considered the guiding principle that ensured the proper functioning of the world and the continuity of life. The pharaoh, as the divine ruler, was responsible for maintaining Ma'at by governing justly, protecting Egypt, and ensuring the well-being of the people. Ma'at was not just a philosophical or ethical principle, it was embedded in every aspect of Egyptian life. It was the standard by which people were judged in the afterlife. The idea of Ma'at was also intimately connected with the Egyptian understanding of the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not the end but a transition into another phase of existence, one that was just as important as life on earth. The Egyptians believed in a judgment after death, where the soul would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at. This judgment was overseen by the god Anubis, who would weigh the heart of the deceased against the feather. If the heart was light and free from sin, the deceased would be granted passage to the afterlife, where they could live in peace in the realm of Osiris. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by the monster Ammit, and the soul would be denied eternal life. The afterlife was not just a continuation of life but a place of eternal peace and happiness, where the deceased could live in the presence of the gods. The Egyptians believed that in the afterlife, the deceased would be able to enjoy the same comforts they had experienced on earth, including food, drink, and social interaction. This belief in an idyllic afterlife was one of the driving forces behind the Egyptian practice of mummification and the creation of elaborate tombs. Mummification and tomb inscriptions. The process of mummification was closely linked to the Egyptian belief in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that the body needed to be preserved for the soul to recognize it and return to it after death. To ensure this, they developed the intricate art of mummification, which involved removing the internal organs, drying out the body with natron, a type of salt, and wrapping the body in linen bandages. Mummification was an expensive and time-consuming process, and it was reserved for the elite. Pharaohs and nobles were mummified and buried in elaborate tombs, often filled with treasures, food, and other items to sustain them in the afterlife. The tombs were designed to protect the body from decay and ensure a safe journey into the afterlife. The walls of these tombs were often decorated with scenes of the deceased engaging in daily activities, as well as prayers and invocations for protection and guidance in the afterlife. Tomb inscriptions, such as the pyramid texts and later the coffin texts, were a crucial part of the burial ritual. These inscriptions contained spells and prayers that were meant to guide the soul of the deceased through the dangers of the underworld and into the realm of Osiris. They were considered vital for the journey of the soul and were often placed on the walls of tombs or inscribed on coffins and other funerary objects. The process of mummification and the creation of tomb inscriptions reflected the Egyptians' deep belief in the importance of the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not a final end but a continuation of life in another realm, and their religious practices were focused on ensuring that the deceased would live forever in the presence of the gods. Religion, mythology, and the afterlife were foundational aspects of ancient Egyptian civilization. The gods and goddesses were not just figures of myth but powerful forces that governed the natural world and human existence. Religious rituals, temple worship, and the concept of Ma'at guided the daily lives of the Egyptians and shaped their worldview. The belief in the afterlife, with its focus on judgment and eternal life, motivated elaborate burial practices such as mummification and tomb inscriptions. These religious beliefs provided a sense of purpose and order to Egyptian society, ensuring that both the living and the dead were connected to the divine forces that maintain the harmony of the universe. Science, medicine, and writing in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt was a civilization renowned not only for its monumental achievements in art, religion, and culture but also for its impressive advancements in science, medicine, and writing. The Egyptians demonstrated a keen understanding of the natural world and applied this knowledge in practical and sophisticated ways. They were pioneers in many fields, from the development of writing systems to the study of medicine, astronomy, and engineering. These scientific advancements were deeply tied to their religious beliefs and practical needs, and they laid the groundwork for many discoveries in the centuries that followed. Hieroglyphics and the role of scribes. One of Egypt's most significant contributions to human civilization was the development of hieroglyphics, a complex system of writing that used pictorial symbols to represent objects, concepts, and sounds. Hieroglyphics were employed in religious texts, royal decrees, monumental inscriptions, and funerary practices, making it the primary writing system for over 3,000 years. This written language was closely associated with the divine and was believed to have been a gift from the gods, particularly the god Thoth, the god of writing, wisdom, and knowledge. Scribes held an important and respected role in Egyptian society. They were responsible for recording official documents, maintaining records, and transcribing religious texts. Scribes were highly trained in the art of writing and often belonged to the elite class of society. To become a scribe required years of education and practice, as the system of hieroglyphs was intricate and involved learning hundreds of symbols. The process of training a scribe typically took place in temple schools, where students learned to read and write hieroglyphics as well as mathematics, law, and religion. Scribes were integral to the functioning of the Egyptian state, serving as administrators, record keepers, and even advisors to the pharaoh. Their ability to write was a sign of status and power, as literacy was limited to a small portion of the population. This made scribes highly influential figures who were often entrusted with the most important duties in government, religion, and society. As scribes recorded the deeds of kings and gods, they helped to preserve the history of Egypt for future generations. In addition to the use of hieroglyphs for monumental inscriptions, the Egyptians also developed a more practical form of writing called hieratic and later demotic script, both of which were used for everyday administrative tasks, legal documents, and personal correspondence. Hieratic was a simplified, cursive version of hieroglyphs, while demotic was even more streamlined and used primarily during the later periods of Egyptian history. Medical knowledge and surgical procedures. Ancient Egypt was also a pioneer in the field of medicine. The Egyptians practiced medicine as both a science and an art, and their knowledge of the human body, diseases, and medical treatments was extensive and advanced for its time. Egyptian physicians were highly respected, and many of their medical practices influenced later cultures, particularly in Greece and Rome. The Egyptians understood the importance of hygiene and cleanliness and took practical measures to prevent the spread of disease. They practiced basic forms of surgery, including trepanation, the removal of part of the skull to treat head injuries or neurological conditions, and they were familiar with the use of herbal remedies and natural substances in healing. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest and most complete medical texts in history, dates back to around 1550 BCE and provides detailed information on a variety of ailments, treatments, and surgical procedures. It includes remedies for common illnesses as well as more complex conditions such as tumors, wounds, and digestive disorders. Egyptian physicians had a clear understanding of anatomy and were skilled in diagnosing ailments based on symptoms. They recognized the importance of the pulse in diagnosing illness and even developed methods to treat fractures and dislocations. Surgical tools, including knives, forceps, and hooks, have been found in tombs, and it is believed that these instruments were used by physicians for procedures such as amputations, dental extractions, and even eye surgeries. Priests also played a role in healing, as many Egyptian doctors were also priests who used religious rituals alongside practical medical treatments. They believed that diseases could be caused by both physical and spiritual factors, and therefore, healing involved both physical treatment and prayer to the gods for intervention. In temples dedicated to healing gods, such as Imhotep, a god of medicine and healing, patients would receive treatments that combined medical procedures with spiritual healing practices. The Egyptian approach to medicine was holistic, blending physical care with spiritual practices. Many of their remedies, surgical techniques, and medicinal formulas were passed down through generations and influenced medical practices in later cultures. The knowledge of Egyptian medicine was also spread through the Greco-Roman world, further cementing Egypt's place in the history of medicine. Astronomy and timekeeping. The Egyptians were also pioneers in the study of astronomy and timekeeping, and their innovations had a profound impact on the development of later scientific knowledge. They closely observed the stars, planets, and the movement of celestial bodies, which were central to their understanding of the cosmos and their religious practices. The rising and setting of the sun, the cycles of the moon, and the stars were not only seen as natural phenomena but as divine actions, reinforcing the connection between the heavens and the earth. One of the most important astronomical achievements of the Egyptians was the development of a solar calendar, which was based on the annual rising of the star Sirius. This event, known as the Heliacal Rising, was closely tied to the flooding of the Nile River, a crucial event for Egyptian agriculture. By observing the stars rise and fall, the Egyptians were able to create a 365-day calendar, which was remarkably accurate for its time. This calendar was the foundation for later timekeeping systems in the Western world. The Egyptians also made advancements in timekeeping using various devices, including sundials and water clocks. These methods allowed them to measure time during the day and night, making them among the first civilizations to develop systems for accurately tracking time. The Egyptian day was divided into 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness, and their understanding of time was closely linked to their religious observances, which were often timed with the movements of celestial bodies. Their knowledge of astronomy was also applied to the construction of temples and pyramids. The alignment of many Egyptian structures with specific stars or constellations indicates that they had a sophisticated understanding of the stars and how to use this knowledge in their architecture. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is precisely aligned with the cardinal points of the compass, and the positioning of the pyramid was likely influenced by the Egyptians' astronomical observations. Architecture and engineering feats. Perhaps one of the most impressive aspects of ancient Egyptian science was its architecture and engineering. The Egyptians are best known for their monumental stone structures, including the pyramids, temples, and tombs, many of which still stand today as a testament to their engineering expertise. The construction of the pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza, remains one of the greatest achievements in ancient engineering. The Egyptians employed advanced techniques to transport and carve massive stones, many of which weighed several tons. They used a variety of methods, including ramps, levers, and sledges, to move the stones into place, and their understanding of geometry and measurement was crucial in ensuring the precision and alignment of these massive structures. The temples of Egypt, such as the Temple of Karnak and the Temple of Luxor, were similarly architectural marvels. These temples were not only places of worship but also centers of political power and cultural life. They were often decorated with intricate reliefs and inscriptions that depicted the deeds of pharaohs and gods, and they were designed to align with celestial events, further highlighting the Egyptians' knowledge of astronomy. The engineering of the pyramids and other monumental structures was supported by a complex system of labor, with skilled workers and craftsmen working alongside vast numbers of laborers who were likely organized into a highly structured workforce. This level of organization and planning speaks to the Egyptians' advanced understanding of logistics, mathematics, and construction techniques. The Egyptians were also pioneers in the use of stone masonry, with many of their buildings constructed from limestone, sandstone, and granite. They were able to cut and shape stones with incredible precision, a skill that enabled them to create massive, durable structures that have lasted for millennia. The Egyptians' mastery of construction techniques is evident not only in their tombs and temples but also in their everyday structures, such as homes and storage buildings, which were often constructed with durable materials and carefully designed to withstand the elements. The scientific and technological achievements of ancient Egypt were remarkable and far-reaching. From their development of hieroglyphics and their role as scribes to their advancements in medicine, astronomy, timekeeping, and engineering, the Egyptians demonstrated an extraordinary ability to understand and manipulate the world around them. Their contributions to knowledge and technology were influential in shaping future civilizations, and their discoveries continue to be appreciated and studied by scholars today. The legacy of ancient Egyptian science remains a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of one of the world's oldest and most influential cultures. The decline and fall of ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptian civilization, which had flourished for thousands of years, underwent a gradual decline over several centuries, culminating in the eventual fall of the Egyptian state. This decline was marked by periods of political instability, foreign invasions, and changes in leadership that altered the course of Egypt's history. Despite its cultural and political prominence during earlier periods, by the end of the first millennium BCE, Egypt found itself subjected to external forces and internal fragmentation. However, even in its decline, Egypt continued to influence the ancient world, particularly through its interactions with foreign powers, the Ptolemaic dynasty, and the eventual Roman conquest. The story of Egypt's fall is both a tale of internal strife and foreign domination, but it also reflects the resilience and enduring legacy of one of the world's oldest civilizations. The Third Intermediate Period, c. 1070 to 664 BCE. The Third Intermediate Period, c. 1070 to 664 BCE, is often considered a time of fragmentation and decline in Egypt's history. It followed the New Kingdom, a period marked by prosperity, military expansion, and grand monumental construction. The causes of the Third Intermediate Period were complex, involving both internal instability and external pressures. The death of Ramses XI, the last ruler of the New Kingdom's 20th dynasty, left Egypt vulnerable to political disintegration and power struggles. The unified state of Egypt began to fracture, and control of the country was divided between rival factions. During this period, Egypt's centralized government weakened significantly, and power was split between various ruling dynasties. The Libyan and Nubian dynasties, in particular, would vie for control over Egypt during this time. The Tanite dynasty, which arose in the northeastern delta, and the 22nd dynasty, ruled by Libyan chieftains, struggled for dominance, often engaging in civil wars and military conflicts with one another. The Nubians, who lived to the south, also gained prominence and were able to establish their own dynasty, the 25th dynasty, around the 8th century BC. Despite these internal conflicts, the Third Intermediate Period also saw continued religious devotion to the traditional gods, particularly Ammonius, as well as the continued construction of temples and the burial of pharaohs in tombs throughout Egypt. However, this period is also marked by the weakening of Egypt's political and military influence in the region, as the Egyptian kingdom was unable to hold its previous territories in the Levant and Nubia. The third intermediate period eventually came to an end with the Assyrian invasion, marking the beginning of Egypt's subjugation by foreign powers. Foreign invasions: Assyrians, Persians, and Greeks. The Assyrians were among the first of a series of foreign powers to invade Egypt during the period of its decline. The Assyrian Empire, known for its military prowess, first invaded Egypt in 675 BCE during the reign of Esarhaddon. The Assyrians captured Egypt's eastern delta and established a puppet ruler. Despite local resistance, Egypt found itself under the control of the Assyrians, who sought to dominate the region as part of their imperial ambitions. However, the Assyrians were unable to fully annex Egypt, and their presence in Egypt was largely short-lived, although they did leave a significant mark on the region's military and political landscape. The next great foreign power to invade Egypt was the Persians. The Persian king Cyrus the Great established the Achaemenid Empire in the mid-6th century BCE, and his successors would expand their dominion to Egypt. In 525 BCE, Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus, successfully defeated the Egyptian army and brought Egypt into the Persian Empire. The Persians ruled Egypt for much of the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, although they faced ongoing resistance from the Egyptian population. Under Persian rule, Egypt was divided into several satrapies, provinces, and its local institutions and religious practices were often subordinated to the Persian state. Despite Persian efforts to maintain control, Egypt's native rulers and local religious institutions occasionally challenged Persian rule. There were a number of uprisings during this period, and the Egyptians managed to temporarily regain independence, particularly during the reign of Amartius in the 5th century BCE. However, the Persians would return, and Egypt would again be incorporated into the Persian Empire under Artaxerxes III in the 4th century BCE. The final chapter of Egypt's subjugation by foreign powers came with the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great in 332 BC. Alexander's conquest marked the beginning of Greek rule in Egypt, ushering in the Ptolemaic dynasty, which would rule Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. The Ptolemaic dynasty and Cleopatra. The Ptolemaic dynasty was founded by Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander the Great's generals, after Alexander's death in 323 BC. The Ptolemies ruled Egypt for about 3 centuries, from 305 BCE to 30 BCE, and although they were Greek in origin, they quickly adopted many Egyptian customs and practices. They embraced Egypt's traditional religion, worshipping the Egyptian gods alongside Greek gods, and their rule was marked by a unique blend of Greek and Egyptian culture, which created a distinctive Hellenistic Egyptian civilization. The Ptolemies established their capital at Alexandria, a city founded by Alexander, and it became a major center of learning, culture, and commerce. The Library of Alexandria, one of the largest and most famous libraries of the ancient world, attracted scholars from all over the Mediterranean. The Ptolemies were also known for their monumental building projects, including the famous Pharos Lighthouse and several grand temples in Egypt. However, despite the cultural achievements, the Ptolemaic dynasty struggled with internal conflicts, royal infighting, and economic difficulties. The most famous and last ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty was Cleopatra VII, who is remembered as one of history's most compelling figures. Cleopatra's reign was marked by her attempts to restore Egypt's independence and power, which had been weakened by both internal divisions and external threats. She famously aligned herself with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, seeking to strengthen her position and protect Egypt from the growing power of Rome. Cleopatra's relationships with both Caesar and Antony are well documented, and her efforts to maintain Egyptian sovereignty were ultimately unsuccessful. After the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE by the forces of Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, Cleopatra and Antony committed suicide. This marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Egypt's absorption into the Roman Empire. Roman conquest and the end of ancient Egyptian rule. Following the defeat of Cleopatra and Antony, Egypt was annexed by the Roman Empire in 30 BCE, bringing an end to the ancient civilization that had lasted for over 3 millennia. Egypt became a Roman province, and its final native pharaoh was Cleopatra. As a Roman province, Egypt remained an important part of the empire, but its political and cultural autonomy came to an end. Under Roman rule, Egypt continued to be a vital source of grain for the empire, and the province remained a significant economic asset to Rome. Alexandria remained an important center of trade, culture, and learning. However, Egypt's status as a once powerful, independent kingdom was now relegated to history. While Roman rule brought stability to Egypt, it also marked the gradual decline of Egypt's ancient religious practices as Christianity began to spread across the empire. By the 4th century CE, Christianity had become the dominant religion in Egypt, and many of the traditional temples and beliefs of ancient Egypt were abandoned or repurposed for Christian worship. The rise of Islam in the 7th century CE would further transform Egypt's religious and cultural landscape, marking the end of ancient Egyptian civilization as it had once existed. The decline and fall of ancient Egypt was a gradual process that unfolded over several centuries, marked by periods of political fragmentation, foreign invasions, and shifting powers. Despite its eventual subjugation by foreign empires such as the Assyrians, Persians, and Romans, Egypt's legacy continued to shape the ancient world through its culture, religion, and scientific contributions. The Ptolemaic dynasty, especially under Cleopatra, represents the final chapter in Egypt's long history as an independent kingdom. While Egypt's political and cultural dominance came to an end with the Roman conquest, the influence of ancient Egyptian civilization endured, leaving a lasting imprint on the Mediterranean world and beyond. Even today, Egypt's ancient monuments, artifacts, and historical achievements continue to captivate the imagination and interest of people around the world. The ancient civilization of Egypt stands as one of the most remarkable and enduring cultures in human history. Over the course of its long existence, Egypt made a wealth of contributions that not only shaped the ancient world but also continue to influence modern societies. From the creation of monumental architecture to profound religious and philosophical ideas, the legacy of Egypt endures in various aspects of contemporary life, culture, and academic research. The ongoing study of ancient Egypt continues to unearth new discoveries that further illuminate the complexity and ingenuity of this fascinating civilization. Summary of Egypt's lasting contributions. Egypt's most lasting contributions are felt across multiple domains, particularly in architecture, religion, science, and art. Among the most iconic and enduring symbols of ancient Egypt are its monumental structures, especially the pyramids, which remain as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The construction techniques employed in the building of the pyramids, particularly those at Giza, demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of geometry, engineering, and labor organization that were far ahead of their time. These feats of architecture, alongside other impressive structures such as temples, obelisks, and tombs, continue to inspire awe in modern audiences and serve as lasting symbols of Egypt's grandeur. In the realm of religion, Egypt's profound belief in the afterlife and the divine nature of kings left an indelible mark on later cultures. The concepts of ma'at, order, balance, and justice, and the spiritual journey of the soul after death influenced various civilizations and religions that came after Egypt. The practice of mummification, the detailed tomb inscriptions, and the belief in gods such as Ra, Osiris, and Isis set a precedent for religious ideas and practices that would later manifest in Greco-Roman religions and beyond. In terms of science, the Egyptians made invaluable contributions to the fields of medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. Their knowledge of anatomy and surgical practices laid the groundwork for later advancements in medical science. The Egyptian calendar, which was based on the lunar and solar cycles, was remarkably accurate and continued to influence calendar systems for centuries. Egyptian innovations in architecture and engineering were also pivotal in shaping future building practices and technologies. Art and literature from ancient Egypt also left a lasting legacy. Egyptian art, known for its distinct style of formalism and symbolism, influenced later artistic traditions, particularly in the Mediterranean region. Additionally, the hieroglyphic writing system, which combined pictorial symbols with phonetic elements, became a foundation for written communication in the ancient world. Much of the art and literature produced during the Pharaonic era continues to be studied and admired today, especially as examples of the rich culture and spiritual beliefs of Egypt. Influence on modern culture and archaeology. The influence of ancient Egypt on modern culture is profound and far-reaching. Over the centuries, Egyptian culture has fascinated countless generations, inspiring everything from the neoclassical architecture of the 18th century to the Art Deco designs of the early 20th century. Egyptian motifs and iconography, such as the Ankh, the Eye of Horus, and depictions of the pharaohs, continue to permeate Western culture, particularly in fashion, design, and popular culture. Modern media, including films, literature, and music, often draw upon the mystique and grandeur of ancient Egypt, creating a cultural bridge between the ancient and contemporary worlds. The allure of ancient Egypt also plays a significant role in modern archaeology. Excavations of Egyptian tombs, temples, and monuments have provided historians and archaeologists with a treasure trove of artifacts and insights into the daily life, politics, and religion of ancient Egyptians. Major discoveries such as the tomb of Tutankhamun and the rediscovery of the Rosetta Stone have shed light on previously hidden aspects of ancient Egyptian civilization. These findings have not only enriched our understanding of the past but have also shaped the field of archaeology as a whole, inspiring future generations of researchers and adventurers. Egyptian influence can also be seen in the continued fascination with Egyptology, the study of ancient Egypt. Museums around the world, particularly the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and the British Museum in London, house extensive collections of Egyptian artifacts, attracting millions of visitors each year. The study of hieroglyphs, ancient Egyptian texts, and the interpretation of ancient religious practices continues to advance, with new technologies and methodologies allowing scholars to uncover even more about Egypt's history and culture. Moreover, the rediscovery of Egyptian antiquities in the 19th and 20th centuries prompted a wave of interest in Egypt's ancient civilization, culminating in the creation of Egyptology as an academic discipline. Today, universities and research institutions around the world offer programs in Egyptology, and the study of ancient Egypt remains a central field of scholarly inquiry. Scholars continue to debate and interpret the mysteries of Egypt, from the construction of the pyramids to the nuances of Egyptian mythology. The ongoing study of ancient Egypt. The ongoing study of ancient Egypt is an evolving field, with new discoveries constantly being made. Modern archaeological methods, including advanced technologies like satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and DNA analysis, have provided fresh insights into Egypt's past. For instance, recent studies have shed light on the lives of the workers who built the pyramids, revealing much about the organization of labor and the treatment of laborers. Similarly, genetic testing of mummies has led to groundbreaking findings about the ancient Egyptian population, their health, and their relationships with other cultures in the Mediterranean and Africa. The preservation of Egypt's monumental heritage has become a significant concern, as many of the country's ancient monuments are threatened by environmental factors, pollution, and the effects of tourism. Efforts to preserve Egypt's ancient treasures have included the construction of new museums, the restoration of temples and tombs, and the digitization of artifacts for future generations. In particular, the creation of the Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza, set to open in the coming years, promises to be a monumental achievement in the preservation and exhibition of Egypt's cultural heritage. As modern technology continues to advance, Egyptology is likely to evolve in new and exciting directions. Virtual reality, 3D modeling, and digital reconstruction could offer future generations an even greater understanding of ancient Egypt's cities, tombs, and monuments. These technologies not only make Egypt's past more accessible to a global audience but also ensure that its ancient achievements continue to be celebrated and studied. The civilization of ancient Egypt has left an indelible mark on human history. Its achievements in architecture, religion, science, and art continue to resonate with modern society, influencing everything from architecture and literature to the study of religion and the pursuit of knowledge. The legacy of Egypt is not only preserved in the monuments and artifacts that have survived through the millennia but also in the continued fascination and study of its culture, which remains a vital part of global heritage. Through the lens of modern archaeology and Egyptology, we continue to explore and understand the complexities of this remarkable civilization. While much has already been discovered, there remains much more to learn. The ongoing study of ancient Egypt will continue to illuminate its influence on the ancient world and its enduring presence in modern culture. In this way, Egypt's legacy lives on, inspiring wonder and admiration for generations to come.